Welcome to lecture number 1 for Recreation and Park Administration. A quick overview is how social movements and institutions have emerged over the past 150 years. This includes the rise of management, the way we view and conceptualize work and work life, and the improvement to quality of life and leisure. And management has really meant the transformation of the workforce. So, as it says here, the main ingredient in transformation of society has been the rise of management. So, for the first time in history, we've been able to focus on things other than survival. And as we do that, we move into a new type of workforce as we move through history. The impact of management on society can be really conceptualized with this thing: how ideas inform practices, and practices inform concepts, and concepts inform ideas, and it kind of goes through all of that. So as practices improve, we have different ideas. As ideas improve and we have different ideas, it improves practices. And the same with concepts. So it really is everything working together to improve the others. What we see at the beginning of the 20th century is a lot of domestic servants. Majority of people who are working were either farmers or factory workers. We have a long work week, 70-hour work week. Can you imagine? And then that just meant little time for leisure and free time. And the workforce has changed quite a bit, moving away from that heavy agricultural workforce into where individuals in agriculture are actually around 3%, and manufacturing is much lower, 18%, and everybody else is in the information-based and service-based industries. As the workforce has changed, so has our improvements to the quality of life. So people today live longer, they're healthier, they have more time and money, and they reach the higher levels of self-actualization, which is like on the Maslow's hierarchy of self-actualization. So as we look at like the industrial society, we'll see a big difference from the late 1800s, early 1900s, and now. With the industrial society, we had a lot of urban crowding. We had a lot of child labor, so this is well before child labor laws. There was a large portion of squalor and poverty. So people were living in unhealthy, unsanitary living conditions as well. And so with the change in technology and the change in society, we've moved away from that. So now, as we think of a new social era and with social reforms that are in place, we get things like parks, open spaces, rec centers, onto playgrounds and child care programs. So things have changed quite a bit from the industrial society to our new social era that we're in now. So here we have a graphic where we can look at the role of the manager and how it helps in the creating of social transformations. So, the role of a manager is to establish vision for social change, promote social reform, change community structures, and mobilize resources. And that's in and outside of the actual workforce. You have a manager in other situations as well. And here we can see, just as we moved from the agricultural era to the industrial era, and now we're on to the information age. Here I just want to give a short list of some notable individuals who have really ushered in what parks and recreation mean in our current lifetime. People like Frederick Law Olmsted, the designer of Central Park and other famous parks around the nation, all the way to Aldo Leopold, who was a big influence in what getting outside and nature meant to people. And I thought this quote by Aldo Leopold was particularly important. There are two things that interest me: the relation of people to each other and the relation of people to the land. And when we start talking about management, when you think about management, a new paradigm. A paradigm is a model or a framework, a way of thinking, or a scheme for understanding the aspects that you're looking at. A couple of big paradigm shifts in recent years regarding management is managers should focus on improving quality of life. Management is universal inside and external to the workforce. And there's no best way to organize some group of people and no one right way to manage individuals. So I thought this was a real good way to look at this. If we look at managers of the past, there were people like a police person, a controller, a dictator, things of that nature. And that's how we would describe managers of the past. And now, today, managers have taken a different role, whereas we got a manager that is a coach, a teacher, a communicator, a cheerleader. They're symbols of integrity and promoter of values. So it's a much different way to look at what management is. As there are a lot of parks, recreation, leisure services housed within government units, it's important to look at how governments are becoming more accountable and efficient related to management. So they often provide managers with a lot more flexibility. They emphasize performance instead of looking at other stuff. They focus on improving service delivery and encourage greater collaboration with partnerships with a lot of different folks, including the public, nonprofit, and the private sector. So even the government has shifted their management paradigm. When we look at the history of social transformation, we can start with the agricultural era and with management, right? And there's a great shift in production when we look at organizing the work of a lot of people in the agricultural area. But the bad thing about this is in this era, it was dominated by a real dictator, authoritarian approach to the management of these folks. As we move into the industrial era, we'll see task differentiation and specialization. So people aren't doing as a wider range of things. They're doing one thing or a few things, more specialized things over and over. We see a different hierarchy of control. We see a lot more insistence on loyalty to the chain of command, so you can't jump the chain of command. We see better record keeping, and then we also see an emphasis on vertical interactions and one-to-one management styles. So we move away from the agricultural into the industrial area. Then, as we move away from the industrial era into the era of knowledge and information, we see a world of globalization, rapid, discontinuous change. The use of technology just proliferates through the entire world. We have more highly educated and aware individuals because they are more connected. And overall, we see a need for new approaches to technology in a lot of different ways. So one way to look at this is the strength-based work revolution. And so it has two assumptions that guide a manager's actions. The first one being each person's talents are enduring and unique. So that person has some specific and unique talents. And the second assumption there is each person's greatest room for growth is in the area of his or her greatest strength. So, we're going to emphasize what they do right and work on it to improve it. And when we think about who makes a good manager or what makes a good manager, we look at skills, competence, knowledge, ability. We want to think about somebody who can identify trends, recognize problems, resolve conflicts. We look at somebody who can reward excellent efforts and lead an organization to grow and mature. And I thought this was a really good graphic to kind of show what contemporary management looks like. It looks like working with individuals to achieve organizational goals, making weaknesses irrelevant through different means, activating the strengths of an individual, so finding those strengths and really working on them, helping individuals understand and focus on the vision and goals from a very specific level with the individual all the way up to the organizational vision and goals, and then removing barriers to success. And here we have the different resources that an organization has. So we look at human resources, the people, fiscal resources, which is the money, and ability to get money. Physical resources, what we have to work with, as far as like tools and technology, or not technology, but tools and stuff like that. And then we have technology tools as well, or technology resources as well, which is stuff like computers, programs, and things of that nature. And what we look for is we're going to need to work with all of them together in a different blend for the organization to make sure that we work toward a vision, a goal, and mature and move the organization forward. I don't know where I got this, but somebody showed me this in a different format. Is basically what are the things that matter when we look at what makes a productive government organization. And the reason I focus on government here is because a lot of parks and recreation is within a government. So what kind of factors? We have a participant focus, so looking at our constituents, employee involvement across all levels, leadership, so you have somebody who is good at leading and communicating, innovation, and not being afraid for change management, so understanding that change is going to happen, but we can manage it in some ways. We can make sure that it works for us, not against us. And then process improvement. So, there's always ways to improve processes and outcomes. The first type of manager we want to look at within leisure services is the supervisor. The primary function of a supervisor is to motivate people that they're responsible for. So it's mostly motivation. The next type of manager is a bureaucrat, and the bureaucrat mostly is there to adhere to policies, procedures, rules, and laws. And then we look at a manager, and a manager is different from a supervisor or a bureaucrat because they're not selected for their intellectual capacity or technical knowledge. So we're not looking at somebody who's just the smartest or just knows the rules. We're looking at somebody who has a unique skill set and to deal with current situations and manage ordeals into the future. So they're looking at the future and how can we best approach the future. So let's take a look at 3 different skills that make a good manager. The first one is technical skills, and this is the ability to use one's knowledge in performance of specific work task. So it's knowing what the task is. The second one is human skills. Recreation Parks and Leisure Service Manager applies his or her ability to motivate people by working with and through them to achieve goals. The third one is conceptual skills. It involves understanding on the part of a manager of how each of the organization's components fit together to meet the goals and objectives of the organization or the department. And also within that, you got to have an understanding of how an organization is affected by and relates to more outside factors and environmental factors. So overall, there are basically 3 types of recreation, park, and leisure service organizations. There's public government organizations, nonprofits, and then commercial and private enterprises. In the public sector, we generate revenue from taxes, fees, donations, grants, contracts, partnerships, and then we get additional resources through use of volunteers and in-kind contributions. If we look at funding through nonprofit or non-governmental organizations such as the YMCA, Boys and Girls Clubs, Boy Scouts, Big Brothers, Big Sisters, etc., they get money through membership fees, donations, grants and contracts, and that's where a bulk of their funding comes from. And then we can look at community enhancements, and then non-cash but in-kind resources in the use of volunteers and in-kind contributions. And then we move into private-oriented, market-driven enterprises. They promote community development through enterprise. Their funding comes from fees and charges, sometimes partnerships. And these will include things like hotels, convention centers, theaters, bowling alleys, those types of things. In recreation, park, and leisure service organizations, there's a constant interaction with the environment. So our interaction between factors in environment may be defined as an interface, such as a face-to-face leadership, where you're at a party or during a coffee break, and when members of a recreation, park, and leisure service organization discuss different activities. A manager in recreation, park, and leisure services needs to recognize various factors that affect delivery of our services and programs. They also need to identify and manage critical interfaces where two or more factors interact with each other that exist between and within factors of the total environment. Okay, so let's recap and provide a little summary here. The arrival of the 21st century brought a whole host of social innovations to our society. So we look at parks and community centers. We have childcare programs, and we get the transformation of what managers do as they play an important role in social transformation. And managers form effective, efficient, and productive management of organizations because they're more flexible in how they manage these organizations and how they manage people. And then we got the influences on work of recreation, parks, and leisure service managers. So there's a greater emphasis on quality, doing more with less, especially with financial resources. We have an introduction of technology and telecommunications. We have a lot of change, and we have a different workforce than we've ever had before. All this to say that recreation, park, and leisure service managers into the future will be things like cheerleaders, coaches, teachers, facilitators, encouragers, and visionaries, no longer the bureaucrat or the dictator of the past. Overall, productive management of any recreation, park, and leisure service organization is greatly dependent upon the ability of a manager to work with and through people to achieve the goals of the organization.